Courage, honor, and duty are some of the cornerstones of serving in the U.S. military. But there is trouble in the ranks for some, including right here in Nevada, where military sex assault is a crime still being reported that can lead to retaliation. And tonight, 13 Action News Chief Investigator Darcy Spears looks at the toll it takes when the rank and file say they've been attacked.
A woman we'll call April to protect her privacy was once willing to lay down her life for her country. Now she's struggling to put it back together after what she says happened not on the battlefield, but at the hands of a superior.
Like, my first thought was just like shutting myself down and going like, even God wouldn't forgive me for like not fighting hard enough to get him off.
April was serving in the Nevada Air National Guard, assigned to the 152nd Wing outside Reno. In February 2018, she met a master sergeant with more than 2 decades of service.
They're often quite encouraged to find like a senior non-commissioned officer who can be their mentor, who can kind of help them with their career progression.
Lindsay Knapp, executive director of the nonprofit group Combat Sexual Assault, is representing April. And April says this initially felt like a mentoring relationship. It involved team building exercises off base, after regular work hours, and on weekends. Routine, they say, in military life.
He would have like this 4-wheeling group,
but in remote areas with few around.
It just turned into the complete opposite of being a mentor and a leader.
April now believes the master sergeant was grooming her.
Like, he was doing little things where he was just being inappropriate, making jokes about sex, making comments about other people and teaching people about women's parts.
April went to her chain of command, reporting she was uncomfortable.
Didn't do anything, they just blamed me and said that I would get written up for fraternization.
Then she says the master sergeant's behavior escalated.
Forcing me to touch him in like inappropriate places and like touching me without my permission. And he took away the knife that he gave me for protection and like whispered, "You won't be needing this," and then just got on top of me, humping me, and just wouldn't stop like touching my private areas. And I was like basically just fighting to get his hands off of me.
She claims she felt helpless to stop these each time they happened.
You are trained to follow the orders of those that outrank you, and those that are superior to you. You are trained to do that without question.
Then in November 2019, April began to fear for her life.
And he was just going off on me, telling me that I had to love him and that his wife settled for him and I couldn't settle for him, that I had to want him and be in love with him.
SARC stands for the military's Sexual Assault Response Coordinator. April reached out, but to no avail. She says the SARC and a senior airman interfered with her attempt to report an assault to police in Sparks.
Said that was the last day to get my rape kit, and security forces heard that and took me off, took me away from the police department and told me to go home.
The next day, April says a senior supervisor found out she was trying to involve police.
He basically told me that I wasn't reporting to law enforcement or the SARC, and I had to go meet with him. And when I did, he told me that was consensual.
Unable to believe what was happening, April defied orders and went that day to Reno police. Reno police ended up closing the case, telling 13 Investigates they couldn't find probable cause to file any charges. April says other findings validated her claims. The military issued a protective order against the master sergeant. So did a Washoe County civilian judge. And after a hearing that included testimony from the master sergeant, that judge checked the sexual assault box on the order. When April sought medical attention on her own, an examination at Travis Air Force Base found an injury which is very common after sexual assaults. Knapp says despite all that, the military didn't investigate further.
We have all of this evidence in black and white that shows that the military is not following its own processes and policies.
The Nevada Air National Guard declined an on-camera interview, but they did tell us they immediately separated the Master Sergeant from the victim, and they requested the Office of Complex Investigations to review April's case, but that office declined, citing the Reno police investigation as the most extensive report into an allegation of sexual assault this office has ever been presented for review. April says she still felt trapped and unable to leave the military.
She could be considered AWOL, right? So you're absolutely right. You cannot just quit, right? You have to endure. You have to put up with the gaslighting. You have to put up with the retaliation. Because if not, they're going to throw you in jail, right? It's not like I work for a corporation and I can just leave.
The Guard tells us they removed the Master Sergeant from the military with an other than honorable discharge for adultery and fraternization. April's attorney says that's the military's way of glossing over the problem.
This is why service members are experiencing retaliation at the rate that they are, because commanders have found that they can just retaliate and get away with it.
Some lawmakers are trying to address that dynamic with a new law, hopefully removing the decision to investigate sexual assault allegations from the chain of command.
It puts highly technical, difficult work in the hands of those who have the most expertise to know how to complete that mission.
Until that becomes a reality, Knapp says those who serve to defend us from foreign threats will be forced to defend themselves against their own.
So now the victim has got to literally scream out to the media to throw up a flare in hopes that Secretary Austin or President Biden is going to see and act. That is not the way the process is supposed to work.
Something might finally be working in April's favor. After 13 Investigates started asking questions, the military decided to allow her to move to a different National Guard unit, approving an expedited transfer which had previously been denied. April's attorney says approving that transfer means commanders must now agree that April has a credible report of sexual assault, and that could raise questions about how her case was handled from the very beginning. Darcy Spears, 13 Investigates.
The Nevada Guard says the potential new law, though, would only be applied to active military, not the reserves. Now, instead, they are working on a new state law, SB 28 it's called, to rework how sex assaults and harassments are handled in the Guard. And so as of January, they will now include the Nevada DPS, Department of Investigations, in processing sex assault claims.